Excellent. All right then, it's 9:31. Good morning, everyone. If you're all a minute late for the rest of your day, you'll know why.
Blaming you, Councillor Moffat.
Welcome to Agenda 16, Monday, May 17th, 2021, meeting of the Environment Committee, also known by a much longer name.
That it is.
I will ask Mr. Zwierkowski. I probably said that wrong this time. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong.
No worries, Councillor. I never complain.
Our beloved Chris. If you could do roll call, please.
I will do so. Councillor Brockington.
Good morning.
Councillor Cloutier.
Présent.
Councillor Derouz.
Here.
Councillor Eglai.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Councillor King.
Present.
Councillor McKinney.
Present.
Vice Chair Menard.
Good morning.
And Chair Moffat. You have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So declarations of interest. Seeing none. Confirmation minutes for the meeting of Tuesday, March 30th, 2021.
Carried.
Carried. Thank you all. Communications, we have response to inquiries, which was Councillor King's inquiry on the Service Line Warranties of Canada program, which we will have a motion on as well today. On to the agenda, with 3 items on the agenda, 2 presentations. Item number 1, status update standing committee on environmental protection, water and waste management, inquiries and motions for the period ending 6th of May, 2021. That the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management received this report for information. Any questions on that, or can we receive that report?
Chair, I think Councillor King had his hand. Councillor King, did you want to?
I did have my hand up, but I
think
that the question could probably be rolled into the motion for efficiency of the meeting. But it was to ask about the potential of a direction based on the inquiry.
Yes, certainly. Well, I mean, the item is on the agenda. I mean, inquiry or no inquiry, the agenda item is there, and it's open for the entire program. So if you have questions on that program, obviously the motion is more on the communication side of things, but certainly that would be opportunity for any directions or additional motions. So can I receive item number 1?
Received.
Received. Thank you. Item number 2 is a report, an update on the source separated organics program, which we'll have a presentation on. And item 3, of course, is that Service Line Warranties of Canada program motion. So therefore, we will go right into item number 2, which is the green bin update.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Just wait for Chris to load the presentation here. Great, thank you so much, Chris. So good morning again. For those of you not aware, my name is Nicole Hoover-Bianash. I'm the Program Manager of Long-Term Planning with Solid Waste Services. Also joining me today is my colleague, Ghislain Lamotte, Program Manager of Public Information. So the purpose of today's presentation is to provide an update on the city's source separated organics program following the launch of program enhancements in July of 2019. So today's presentation will walk you through just briefly the background on the source separated organics program. We'll walk through some of the key performance indicators, both waste related metrics and the communication campaign effectiveness. Then we'll walk you through some results of the follow-up market research that were undertaken to first, assess the effectiveness of the campaign. Second, the shift in participation. And 3, how behaviors were impacted by the program changes. Next slide, please. Okay, so recognizing the many benefits of diverting organics from landfill, Council approved the establishment of one of Ontario's first full curbside source separated organics programs in April of 2007, which launched in 2010. And as members of Council will recall, the initial relationship with OrgaWorld, now Convertus, and the original contract were quite problematic for the city, which led to a number of contract disputes in the early days. So council approved a contract settlement back in 2018 that included a number of revisions geared towards getting maximum value for municipal taxpayers. So this included lowering the annual put or pay threshold, a lower processing rate for plastic bags and dog waste, and of course the introduction of a major policy change to allow for the acceptance of dog waste and plastic bag liners, which also included the acceptance of compostable bag liners. While the primary goal of enhancing the green bin program was to settle the contract dispute, it also had the anticipated benefit of helping address barriers to green bin participation and increasing organics diversion through the acceptance of plastic bag liners and dog waste. So in 2019 and into 2020, Council made a significant investment in communications and outreach to educate residents about the enhancements and to increase program participation. So staff retained Hill and Knowlton strategies to conduct in-depth market research to help us learn about resident behaviors and attitudes, to identify target audiences, and to help develop tailored messages. Just as a quick refresher, as you'll recall back in the 2018 original market research, the target audiences that were identified included the superstars, the inconsistent, the aspirational, and the disconnected. So the superstars, which represent about 29% of all Ottawa residents, are mostly homeowners with curbside collection, and they're nearly universal green bin users who simply do not use the green bin more because they mistakenly place organic waste in the garbage. Then we have the inconsistents, which represent about 28% of Ottawa residents and are mostly homeowners with curbside collection. While they're mostly green bin users, they do not use it more because of the yuck factor. The aspirational represent about 19% of all Ottawa residents. Out of the aspirational group, you have approximately an even split between curbside collection and multi-residential properties. Nearly half of them do not use the green bin, but they have positive attitudes towards waste diversion. And then the last group, the disconnected. So they represent about 24% of all Ottawa residents. They're mostly renters. You have a 40-60 split. So 40% being curbside households and 60% living in multi-residential properties. More than half do not use the green bin, and they have limited knowledge of waste diversion programs. So as you recall, the inconsistent and aspirational groups who have mostly positive attitudes towards waste diversion and whose main reasons for not participating in the green bin program, being the yuck factor and inconvenience, of course, presented the greatest opportunity to target, to increase both participation once plastic bag liners and dog waste were permitted, and also increasing their intensity of use. So that's where our communications and outreach efforts were targeted to these particular markets. Next slide, please. So staff built on the comprehensive market research to develop a two-phase communications plan. So first was focused on increasing awareness that dog waste was now accepted in the green bin and that plastic bags were one of the many options available to residents to store organic waste in the green bin. And then to address the main barriers to participation through a series of targeted campaigns. So since some of these this key policy decision was made by council, in the meantime, we've had other council and provincial decisions that have further underscored the need to work towards increasing participation in the green bin program. So including council's declaration of a climate emergency with the target to reduce corporate greenhouse gas emissions by 100% by 2040 and community emissions by 100% by 2050. And also the province's direction to prevent and reduce food and organic waste from making its way to landfill. So as members of committee will recall, the province aims to divert 70% of food and organic waste generated by single-family homes by 2023 and 50% in multi-residential properties by 2025. It also plans to ban food and organic waste from landfill with phased implementation across the province by 2030. So this was recently changed from the province's earlier indication that they'd have a landfill ban in place across the province by 2022. Next slide, please. So in terms of assessing program performance, when staff presented the green bin implementation plan to council in 2019, we did commit to reporting back to committee and council approximately a year after the changes were introduced. And this was the primary reason for that was to provide early insight into the success of the program enhancement, including the effectiveness of the communications campaign, and also to provide some insight into how and if the program changed has helped address barriers to participation. So it's important to remember that behaviors are often linked to longstanding habits and core beliefs that have been ingrained in individuals throughout the course of their lives. So behavior change is something that doesn't take place overnight. It does take time, and that because we're only 2 years into the program enhancements today, today's presentation and the metrics and the information contained in the staff report should be viewed within that context. And again, it's still very early into these program changes. So the performance measures that we'll be providing some insight into today that were used to assess program performance include collected tonnages, set out study results, which measure the number of households participating in the program, tracking of service calls, curbside requests for new green bins, new multi-residential properties that have registered for the green bin program, communications and outreach effectiveness measurements, and the results of follow-up market research. Next slide, please. So while the updates staff are providing today do demonstrate promising signs that the policy change has been effective in helping reduce barriers to green bin use and increasing use and participation in the green bin program, it's important to recognize that the COVID-19 pandemic started about 8 months after the program enhancements were implemented, and of course it continues today. And it's unclear at this point if the trends that we're seeing today will be temporary or if it's something that will be sustained after the pandemic ends. With many residents working from home and disposing of more waste at home instead of in the workplace, we've seen quite a significant shift in terms of waste transitioning from the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector to the residential sector. It's not unique for the city. It's been experienced by many other of our municipal counterparts, which we'll touch on in a little bit more detail throughout today's presentation. So again, this data that we're providing today should be seen as a snapshot. It's an abnormal time with more detailed and long-term studies to continue post-pandemic to understand if what we're seeing today is indicative of future trends. Next slide, please. So kickstarting things in terms of tonnage trends. So the city collected 9% more organic leaf and yard waste in 2019 over 2018, with a further 15% increase in 2020. So this brings us to just over 775,000 tons of organic waste that has been successfully diverted from the Trail Road landfill since the program was launched in 2010. During our peak leaf and yard waste season, as members of committee are familiar, the city does divert separately collected leaf and yard waste to Barnesdale, where it can be processed at a lower rate. So we have been increasing our efforts on this front. And last year, we diverted a record amount of leaf and yard waste to Barnesdale during our peak spring and fall seasons. So you'll see the second statistic here on this slide indicates that the remaining organics and commingled leaf and yard waste that was sent just to Convertus, the city sent about 5% more in 2019 over 2018, with a further 6% increase in 2020. Next slide, please. So continuing on with tonnage trends, we typically take a look at February, which is why you're seeing February tonnages here, because they're most representative of true household organic waste, because there is minimal leaf and yard waste that is often seen within the program during that time frame. And because leaf and yard waste tends to be quite variable, it's heavily impacted by precipitation, by temperatures and seasons, that can have a significant impact on annual tonnages. So this will give you a greater insight into actual household organics tonnage trends. So when you look at the year-over-year comparison, the city collected 19% more tonnage in 2020 over 2019, with a further 21% increase in 2021. And just a quick note to keep in mind too, that the provincial stay-at-home order was still in place in February of 2021. Next slide, please. So as I highlighted earlier, COVID-19 pandemic has had a unique impact on waste, and the biggest change that we've seen has in fact been in the organic stream. So Policy Integrity Consulting surveyed 13 municipalities in Ontario between March 9th and April 27th of 2020, so earlier days of the pandemic. They included interviewing the City of Ottawa, and that was to help provide some insight into what was happening in the industry and the impact that we're seeing. So overall, they found a 12% increase in green bin tonnage across those municipalities compared to the same dates in 2019. When you take a look at Ottawa, Ottawa saw nearly a 50% increase during those dates. One key important thing to take into consideration when looking at that statistic, though, is that Ottawa is the only municipality that was surveyed in this particular scan that accepts leaf and yard waste commingled with its organics waste in our green bin program. And the dates that study took place aligned with the start of peak leaf and yard waste season. So the second statistic you see here, so if we're taking out that separately collected leaf and yard waste that we do send to Barnsdale, there was still a 56% increase in organics and commingled leaf and yard waste sent to Convertus. So still quite a significant increase in comparison to our counterpart municipalities as part of that survey. So while we don't have definitive data to quantify the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had, on the impact to our tonnages. The follow-up market research that we'll be elaborating on later in the presentation does demonstrate, though, that the pandemic was not the only reason for the increase in tonnages. Next slide, please. So when we take a look at participation specific to curbside households, so this in the fall of 2018, as part of our 4-season waste audit study, in the fall of 2018, we visited 100 homes in various neighborhoods across the city to get a baseline of how many set out a green bin on collection day. And we did that again in the fall of 2020, so after the program changes were in place, to track changes in participation. So in 2019, 2018, so before the program changes, about half of households set out a green bin at least once. That proportion increased by 8% over a 2-year period. And of the households that set out their green bin in the 2020 participation study, about 55% of those households had a visible plastic bag liner. When we took a look at incoming calls, so to our call center, we had a 35% increase in green bin requests in July of 2019 compared to July of 2018. The number of residents requesting a replacement bin more than doubled, and the number asking for an additional bin increased by 88%. And the increase in requests also continued in the months following the introduction of the program change, where we saw a 43% year-over-year increase in August and a 30% year-over-year increase in September following the program changes. Next slide, please. So taking a look at participation in multi-residential properties. So while the goal of the program enhancements were to support increased resident participation in the green bin program, and of course that increase in usage of the program as well, because of the complexity of waste diversion in multi-residential properties, and in particular barriers faced by property owners and management to introduce a green bin program at their properties, in mid-2020, changes were made to the city's new multi-residential collection contract to address one of the top barriers to participation that was identified by property owners and managers who are part of the city's multi-residential diversion working group. And the number one challenge that they had to, first and foremost, introducing a program to their building was the need to bring the green bin to the curb for collection. So after those program changes, bins are now collected on site at multi-residential properties right alongside where recycling and garbage is picked up. So staff conducted extensive outreach to property owners. So we contacted every single property throughout the city in the lead up to that contract change as part of outreach efforts to let them know about the contract change, but also to let them know about the program enhancements and the ability to reduce the yuck factor. So these efforts combined led to a 37% increase in the number of properties and a 41% increase in the number of units with access to green bins. So as of March 1st of this year, 44% of all multi-residential properties across the city, and about a third of all units across the city now have access to a green bin program. So when we're taking a look at tonnages, before the new contract, green bins at multi-residential properties were collected as part of the curbside contract. And for that reason, all organic waste was commingled with curbside. So we don't have separate tonnage data available to us before the program changes. However, in the 8 months since the contract change, the city has collected about 555 tons of organic waste from multi-residential properties. So the low tonnage, of course, highlights the complexity and increasing participation in multi-residential properties. You know, it's not just simply about getting green bin programs into multi-residential properties. Of course, that's the first barrier, but then there's a lot of work required in order to get residents participating in the program. So there's that requirement for extensive education and outreach, but there's also more work that's required to help break down some of the barriers of inconvenience. So the original market research undertaken in 2018 found that a quarter of respondents, many of whom live in multi-residential properties, which I touched on earlier, are disconnected, and they typically do not use the green bin and have limited knowledge of waste diversion programs. So of course, it underscores that need for extensive education, outreach, but also some work moving forward in terms of breaking down those barriers, a lot of building design considerations in order to make it more convenient for residents to participate. Next slide, please. So in terms of end use product, when council approved the program enhancements, there were some concerns that were raised by members of council and the public that allowing plastic bag liners in the green bin would impact the end product quality, which is used as non-agricultural source material fertilizer, as well as animal bedding. As council or members of committee will recall, the quality and the type of the end product made from organics processing, as well as the ability to use plastic bags as liners and accepting dog waste is entirely under provincial regulation, not municipal. And the province's priority is to transition to a circular economy. So trying to encourage as much recovery of resources from organic waste and turning that into a valuable and reusable end product. So the Ontario Compost Quality Standards do outline a requirement that plastics greater than 2.8 millimeters, so that's about the size of a sesame seed, in the end product are less than 0.5% of the product. So Convertis, as our organics processor, is responsible for meeting this standard and sharing their test results with the province. So Convertis has provided us with certificates of analysis that outline the quality of the end product, both before and after the program enhancements. So, and it's showing that they continue to comply with this standard. So total plastics greater than 2.8 millimeters were 0.01% in March of 2019, so before the program changes were introduced. 0.1% in October 2019, so shortly following the program changes, and are sitting at 0.11% just over a year later when tested in January of this year. Of course, as science evolves and the provincial federal regulators learn more about plastics and microplastics and the impact on the environment, we do expect that these regulations around beneficial use and end-use products will change. Of course, that's something that we continue to monitor to understand what this will mean for industry and how they will have to respond. So now I'm going to pass things over to Ghislain. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Nicole. At the last update to the committee in June 2019, we committed to come back to provide an update on the implementation of the campaign along with performance measures. As a reminder, Council made significant investment of nearly $500,000 in communications and outreach to promote the Green Bin program enhancements. Part of that investment was for the 2018 market research, which provided the necessary data to implement a comprehensive evidence-based communications and outreach plan. As my colleague Nicole mentioned earlier, there were 4 groups identified in the research: the superstars, the aspirationals, the inconsistents, and the disconnected. For the campaign, we targeted the aspirational and inconsistent groups as they are identified as most likely to change their behaviors. The research also provided data that helped shape the campaign with the messaging, the visuals, and the channel selection. And as a reminder, we used a multi-phase approach, which I'll provide more details on the next slides. The first phase was a 2-month program launch. Our objective was to create general awareness of the program changes. As a reminder, the research had shown that 56% of residents were not aware of the upcoming changes to the green bin, 63% were more likely to use the green bin once plastic bags were permitted, and 61% were more likely to use the green bin once dog waste was permitted. For the launch, we had a broad distribution to all residents, which was then followed by targeted communications to the aspirational and inconsistent groups. We focused on 3 major barriers, which was the yuck factor, the inconvenience, and the fact that some people don't have a green bin. While we informed residents about the new plastic bag option, we promoted the use of all bag options, such as paper bags. I'll move to the next slide, please. In terms of channel selection, we applied a combination of paid advertising and free promotional assets, as you can see from the list on this screen. The primary tactic for the launch was a citywide mailout in the summer of 2019. It was sent to 290,000 households and more than 17,000 units in multi-residential properties. I'll move to the next slide, please. For the second phase, we addressed the main reasons for not participating in the green bin program. We launched a new campaign about every 4 to 6 weeks to address a specific reason identified by a very specific target audience. Communication tactics, messages, and the channels were tailored to those audiences. All of it was based on the market research. Next slide, please. You will see on this slide the list of the campaigns that we ran from September 2019 to March 2020. The initial plan was to run monthly campaigns for about a 10-month period, so from September 2019 to June 2020. However, with the start of COVID-19 in March 2020, we need to reallocate our resources to fight the pandemic, and this forced us to end the campaign in March 2020. Next slide, please. In addition to the push communications and advertising, staff from the Public Works and Environmental Services Department conducted extensive outreach activities to have face-to-face conversations with residents. They conducted door-to-door outreach to inform residents about the enhancements. The ambassador program, which was called the Green Bin Brigade, composed of 10 summer students. They visited neighborhoods in 7 wards based on the audience segmentation data, which included a high concentration of the aspirational and inconsistent groups. The brigade interacted with nearly 8,000 residents and left information to more than 22,000 homes. Residents appreciated the outreach and the opportunity to get some clarity on program changes. Staff also attended 52 events and interacted with nearly 3,000 residents. As some outreach activities were canceled due to the pandemic, staff adapted their plans and provided more than 5,000 toolkits to 44 multi-residential properties that recently started with the Green Bin program. I'll move on to the next slide. You'll see on this slide that the expenses, which is a summary of the expenses for the communications and the outreach. This includes the initial market research work that was started in 2018 and the latest research that was conducted 2 years later. The rest of the expenses includes the mail out, the paid ads, and the outreach expenses. In all, it's just shy of $450,000. And in addition to the paid advertising, the city used many of its free advertising assets, and this includes ads on buses, bus shelters, digital screens, our collection vehicles, and that was done throughout the campaign. And the value of these free advertising assets was more than $265,000. Next slide, please. Now, one of the reasons we're back here today is to provide an update on the performance. On this page, you'll see some of the metrics for our online ads. I'll start by saying that we exceeded the industry benchmarks for our advertising. We received more than 2.1 million views for our online paid ads, and that doesn't include social media. And there was a 0.14% click-through rate for that. And to give you an idea in terms of the industry average, for these types of ads, it's usually around 0.10%. In terms of YouTube, our videos had the highest engagement with a view rate of 40%. And if you compare that to the industry average, again, it's about 10% higher. In terms of, we had 3.3 million views on Facebook and Instagram, and a close to 1% click-through rate. And those ads performed about 10% higher than the industry average. To give you an example, also, one of our best performing ads was the green bin replacement story, where we had an 8.3% click-through rate. In terms of web views, and that tells also quite a significant story. In terms of the views for the green bin page on ottawa.ca, during the first month of the campaign, so in July 2019, we had over 23,000 views. Meanwhile, if you look back at that same month, so July, but a year prior, so in July 2018, there was only 7,900 views. So it's an increase of 400%. I'll move on to the next slide. So finally, we had committed to council that we'd be doing some advertising recall as part of this project. Once again, the pandemic had another impact on this project. The plan was to conduct the market research in early Q2 of 2020. Being fully engaged with the COVID-19 response, we needed to delay this work. This in turn created a longer period of time between the ads and the mail out and the survey itself about the campaign. So in late 2020, staff commissioned Hill and Knowlton Strategies to conduct follow-up market research to assess the impact of the program changes, to understand the barriers towards participating in the program, as well as doing some advertising recall. In terms of advertising recall, the results are good, with a 45% overall recall. However, we do believe that the numbers would be higher if people would have been asked 6 months prior. So essentially 6 months after receiving the letter, instead of more than a year. And as you can see from the numbers in the reports and on this slide, it was a highly socialized campaign. I will now pass it over to Nicole for the remainder of the presentation.
Great, thanks, Ghislain. So continuing with the follow-up market research, what it did reveal in terms of changes in attitudes related to the green bin. So 80% of respondents did agree with the key messages of the campaign. So some of the key aspects that resonated well were that we do need to collectively, as a community, divert organic waste from landfill to not only save taxpayers dollars, but as that opportunity to lower emissions. And also that key message on using the green bin is in residents' best interest, and it's an easy way to help the environment. Respondents continue to have high levels of satisfaction with the green bin program. There was virtually no change in the proportion of respondents who said that they hate using the green bin. So we had about 18% saying so in 2020 and 19% saying so in 2018/2019. There was virtually no change in the proportion of, This, of course, shows that the changing attitudes, especially amongst the disconnected group who have a limited knowledge on waste diversion programs, does in fact take time. Next slide, please. So in terms of the follow-up market research and what it unveiled, specific to curbside households, is that there was an 11% increase in self-identified participation rates amongst the curbside collection. So that was up to 88% in 2020. The city introduced plastic bag liners, of course, to address the yuck factor, which was the top reason curbside respondents said that they didn't use the green bin program as part of the initial market research in 2018/2019. So that follow-up market research has found that the yuck factor is no longer the top barrier to participation. So of course, we're seeing an evolution in terms of barriers. There was a 15% decrease in respondents who identified the yuck factor as a reason to not start using the green bin. So it's quite a significant decrease, down to now only 8% of all respondents. And there was a similar 16% decrease in respondents who identified the yuck factor as the reason for not using it more. So those already using it, but who could increase their intensity of use. So down to 15% of respondents. And the new top reason to not start using the green bin program, which was identified by about a quarter of respondents, was that they don't have a green bin. And this was followed by 19% who feel that it's still too inconvenient to use. The new top reason for those using the program, but for not using it more, is that, which was identified by nearly a quarter of all respondents, was that they forget to put items in the garbage by mistake. And 14% said that they don't use the green bin more because they aren't 100% clear in terms of what goes in it, which of course represents an opportunity for greater education and will form the basis of our upcoming and ongoing public education campaign this year, as well as into the future. Next slide, please. So when we look at the follow-up market research and what it unveiled in terms of the multi-residential sector, respondents in multi-residential properties reported only a slight increase in access to the green bin program. So hovering around about a third of respondents, which of course aligns with the number of units and residents that have access to participating in a green bin program. So encouragingly, there was a 10% increase in the number of respondents who have indicated that they would use a green bin if they had access to it. So we're up to 83% in the 2020 market research. The top reason respondents said that they wouldn't use the green bin, even if they had access, was inconvenience. And the top 2 reasons for not using the green bin more has not changed much since 2018. And that, of course, is inconvenience as well, and forgetting to put items in the garbage by mistake. And then the third biggest barrier, where we saw a 14% increase in respondents citing it, was running out of space in the green bin. So of course, all this combined, it does highlight one of the many complexities in increasing participation among multi-residential properties. However, of course, staff continue to work with property owners and to address barriers to participation, and continue our work on introducing green bin collection in new properties. We have about just under 50 new properties who have indicated that they're interested in joining the property once the COVID-19 pandemic is, I guess, a distant past memory. And we'll also continue targeted education and outreach efforts, albeit this year it's going to be a little bit different, and we're shifting gears towards more of a virtual outreach, but exploring opportunities once the COVID-19 pandemic is over and allows us to more of that in-person outreach, to continue doing that in-person outreach. And of course, staff continue work on developing the multi-residential diversion strategy, with the goal of bringing that forward for council consideration early next year. Next slide, please. So in the original market research in 2018 and 2019, 63% of respondents said that they were more likely to use the green bin once plastic bag liners were allowed, and 61% once dog waste. So in 2020, the follow-up market research, respondents who used the green bin before the July 2019 program change were asked how their participation changed after the program enhancements were put in place. So 30% reported using the green bin more, with 69% of those individuals saying that it was largely because of the program changes. And we look at among dog owners, 52% reported using the green bin more, with 94% saying it was largely because of the program changes. So 73% of respondents who use a green bin have reported that they put their waste in a bag. 40% started doing so, or indicated that they started doing so after the program changes. 40% started to do so for household organic waste, with 75% for dog waste after the enhancements. Compostable and biodegradable bags are the most common liners used by participants in the program, though 45% of respondents continue to use paper bags. And about a third of individuals place their organic or dog waste in plastic bags. And for those who started bagging their waste after the program changes, the proportion using plastic bags is higher. So you're seeing about a 10% more than the overall average. Next slide, please. So given the ongoing pandemic and the timing of the follow-up market research, we used it as an opportunity to also include a series of questions to assess the impact that the pandemic has had on participation. So 52% of respondents indicated that they worked from home at some point during the pandemic, with 37% reporting that they used the green bin more while working from home. And this was mostly because they were eating and cooking more at home. Of this group, 6% said that they started using the green bin while they were working from home. 28% of respondents with curbside collection reported an increase as well in leaf and yard waste during the pandemic. And this was primarily because they had indicated that they had more time to do yard work. So of course, as we can see from this data that we've just walked through, the impact of the pandemic has definitely had an impact on shifting residents' behaviors in terms of using the green bin program. But we've also seen from the market research insights that the introduction of the policy change to include the acceptance of plastic liners as well as dog waste has had an impact on program participation. Next slide, please. That brings us to our final slide in the presentation in terms of next steps. So although this presentation does provide that interim snapshot during an abnormal time, The increase in tonnage and participation, of course, are encouraging. And the follow-up market research indicates that the program enhancements, coupled with the targeted evidence-based communications and outreach, have been effective in helping address the top barriers to participation, which is in turn has helped spark behavior change in terms of increasing program participation and program use. The follow-up market research, of course, will help inform future communications and our outreach efforts, including to ensure that residents with curbside collection know how to get a green bin, and also to educate all residents about what goes in the green bin so that they don't forget to use it or put items in it by mistake. As I touched on earlier, we'll also continue our education outreach efforts, in particular in the multi-residential sector, primarily focusing on encouraging more buildings to join the program and providing education to the tenants of new buildings as they join the program. Behaviors are often linked, as I touched on earlier, to longstanding habits and core beliefs that have been ingrained in individuals throughout the course of their lives. We have environmental and social factors that can also influence behavior. So to encourage behavior change, staff are working on the development of the solid waste master plan and a number of component projects that are exploring additional policy and program mechanisms that will be aimed at supporting sustained behavior change. So next month, Council will receive and consider phase 2 of the solid waste master plan, which will recommend the vision, guiding principles and goals for the master plan. It will also outline the city's future waste management needs, some of the key gaps, constraints, as well as opportunities, and the long list of options that the city consider to address them. It will also include a triple bottom line evaluation tool that staff will be using to evaluate all the options to generate a shorter list for resident and stakeholder consultation later this year. And Council will consider the draft strategy for the draft master plan in 2022. Staff are also working, as I had highlighted, on the development of a multi-residential diversion strategy, which we intend on tabling for Council consideration early next year. So we've been in the process of reviewing best practices in other municipalities, emerging trends. We've also undertaken a comprehensive literature review that will help inform recommended pilots, programs, and initiatives that will help drive diversion in this sector, especially within the short term. And we intend on consulting with residents and stakeholders on some of these various options and considerations later this fall. Staff also plan to undertake an updated forest season waste audit in 2022-2023, pending the outcome of the pandemic. And that's going to help us assess waste composition. And it will give us greater insight in terms of how much organic material we've been able to successfully shift out of the garbage stream and into the green bin program. And as I'd indicated earlier, we also plan on reporting back next, approximately 1 year after the end of the pandemic. At that point, we anticipate that the impacts of the pandemic to have settled. We'll have a better sense of what the new norm is, and will give us some better insight in terms of behavior shifts outside of this normal time. So that brings us to the end of today's presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Nicole. Appreciate that. Ghislaine, thank you as well. I'm going to go straight to our public delegations. We have one registered speaker, which is Duncan Burry with Waste Watch Ottawa. Duncan, go ahead.
Greetings. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to this item. I'm here today representing Waste Watch Ottawa. In reviewing the status of the organics program, I would urge you to focus more attention on the actual collection and participation data in the staff report and less on the survey data reported by Hill and Knowlton, which obviously concentrates more on perceptions, aspirations, and opinions, and less on the facts on the ground. The staff report shows what could be described at best as a modest improvement in both the tonnages of organics collected and in the participation rate in the program, and that's definitely a good thing. However, as the staff report states, the pandemic has caused increased generation of household waste both here in Ottawa and elsewhere, and I would therefore urge some caution in reading too much into the numbers presented. So the report does show an increase in the tonnage delivered, so 6.1% in 2020. But it also shows that the proportion of households using the green bin has also improved from 58% to 50%, from 50%. This shows some progress, but that still means that 40% of Ottawa residents are still not willing or able to access the green bin program. This is clearly a problem. In addition, the city's waste diversion rate has only crept up to 46% in 2020 from 43% in 2018. We need to get to over 60% to match the performance of leading municipalities. The Hill and Knowlton study is, however, useful in identifying some of the challenges. It shows, for example, there is still a stubborn 18 to 19% of residents who hate using the green bin and don't think recycling and the green bin do much for the environment. It also shows that the supposed yuck factor, that was a major consideration, maybe isn't such a big issue after all. 8% of the residents said it was a problem. Not having a green bin, inconvenience, too much trouble, bugs, vermin, uncertainty, what goes in the green bin altogether, those were constraints that were cited by collectively 61% of residents. So I think that clearly shows the kind of direction that the work needs to go in. The city's efforts to improve the green bin access for multi-residential building appears to be showing some success, although again, there is a long way to go. Despite the progress, 2/3 of multi-residential units still do not have access to the program. Waste Watch Ottawa continues to have concerns about the quality of the compost being produced by the program. While the addition of plastic bin liners might have had some small impact on participation, it has at the same time created a processing challenge. Participation, the bags have to be removed, and recovering all the plastics is next to impossible. The report states that in January 2021, plastics larger than 2.8 millimeters in size represented 0.11% of the compost produced at the plant. This sounds like a small number, but it is 11 times more than before encouraging the use of plastic bags. With a total of 85,000 tons of organics diverted and taking account of evaporation during processing, which perhaps reduces that tonnage by half, this translates to approximately 45 tons of plastic bits in the completed compost. Looked at another way, and using US Environmental Protection Agency weight to volume estimates, this 45 tons of loose plastic equivalent to about 2,800 cubic yards of film. That would fill about 270 dump trucks. So, I mean, it seems small, but in actual fact, when you look at it as a loose plastic mixed in with the compost, it's actually a fairly significant number, and surely we can do better. And as the staff report just suggested, those standards that allow this right now might change in the future. The report cites tonnage of organics delivered to the converter's plant, but it does not report on the tonnage of plastic waste that is screened out and other detritus which is taken out and then disposed of. These numbers are essential to assess the true impact of allowing plastic bags. Saying that the compost meets the NASM standard is really not good enough. In conclusion, promotion and education can only get you so far in encouraging more use of the green bin. Ultimately, committee and council are going to have to restructure the waste management system to make more households more directly responsible for the waste they generate and for participation in the diversion programs. User pay systems have been proven to provide that necessary incentive, and we are hopeful that the next round of solid waste master plan will cite user pay as an effective strategy to improve waste diversion, and that ultimately council will adopt such a system. Waste Watch Ottawa strongly believes that user pay will drive a much larger improvement in the organics program than shown today. A user pay system will also serve to extend the life of the Trail Road landfill site, which is likely an irreplaceable asset that must be jealously guarded. So thank you very much for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you. I think Councillor Menard has a question for you, Duncan.
Thanks. Yeah, I see others have their hand up for the report, so just give you the wave. Thanks, Chair. So thanks, Duncan, for being here. I wanted to get your view on the federal government's announcements in the last year or so, talking about banning single-use plastic bags. They had initially set a deadline of the end of 2021. Just your view of that policy announcement and the alternatives that may exist for things like biodegradable bags.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. The federal government actually just a week ago officially put manufactured plastic items on the Canadian Environmental Protection Act Schedule 1 toxics list, which gives them all the tools they need to in fact ban the list of single-use plastics, including plastic bags that they announced a while ago. So we've always found it ironic that at a time when the world is trying to get away with single-use plastics, the city of Ottawa is in fact encouraging their use. So I think that, you know, we could see a time in the future where in fact these kind of bags could in fact be banned. So I think that's a consideration for going forward. As to the compostability issue, there's a real challenge there. I mean, a lot of people, I think, would suggest that compostable bags are in fact a solution, but the reality is that the standard for compostability is for biodegradation in 12 weeks of industrial compost processing. And most of the composting plants, including the ones we have here in Ottawa, do that in 2 to 3 weeks. So there's a big disconnect here between the actual reality of biodegradation and the actual composting process. And biodegrading bags do in fact create a huge problem. If you're trying to collect PET and high density polyethylene, you've got mixed into that compostable plastics, this degrades the quality. So I don't think that in fact compostable bags or plastics are in fact the solution. There may be some niche applications, but as a broad answer to the issue, I don't really think it's a direction that is really very productive in the long run.
Okay, thank you for that. Just to follow up on the piece, particularly around dog waste, because that was one of the big reasons why this was enacted. And so I just what for dog waste and the acceptance of that now in the agreement, what is your view on that, and how people in a practical sense would get their dog waste continue to get their dog waste into the green bin in a sustainable way?
I don't think we have enough data to answer that. I'm not a scientist. I don't see the information available as to what that, in terms of pathogens and so forth. I have seen some studies that suggest that dog waste added to compost like this could in fact be an environmental and potentially a health issue, albeit perhaps a minor one. I think the city needs to be looking at other things like special dog bins. There's a very interesting program in Waterloo where they have a special program, and all that dog waste is centralized and taken to a particular plant and not mixed in with compost. I mean, I think generally speaking, you need to keep these things separate. So adding dog waste, I still think is not a good idea.
Okay, fair. You answered my question in the second portion of that, rather than focusing on putting dog waste in the green bin, which lots of people use plastic bags for their dog waste when they
yes.
You're saying a separate program that would deal with this and potentially waste to energy, that sort of thing, that could occur with the dog waste.
Yeah, correct. And the city of Waterloo has a program which I think is was sort of pioneering. I'm not too sure how broadly they've expanded it, but I think it's well worth looking at. It goes to a plant in Elmira where they do in fact recover it for energy production. And
then just very last question. Duncan, did you see anything in the report that talked about the change in people's behavior that were previously using the green bin without plastic bags, but then switched to plastic bags? I don't. That's a question I have: is how many people have switched from one to the other? Any comment on that?
Well, I think there seems to be, I can't answer that. I mean, I've read it through, there are a lot of numbers in that study. As I said, I would focus on what actually is happening on the ground rather than what you've heard from respondents. There seems to be some suggestion that there was an improved willingness to use the program. But the fact of the matter is 45% of people are using paper bags. So if people can successfully use paper bags, why are we encouraging them to use plastic? That would be my answer to that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being here.
My pleasure.
Thanks. Just while you're here, can I get your comments on, I talked about this in the past and I actually just threw it out there this morning. There's a fairly noted study that would imply that, and I've talked about this with other environmental advocates as well, who generally support the theory that plastic bag alternatives are often considered to be worse for climate change impact than the thing they're replacing. Can I get your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we've got a plastics problem. We generally produce way too much of it. We need to produce less. We can recycle our way out of some of this, but ultimately we need to probably reduce and make plastics more reusable. I mean, plastics are wonderful materials. I mean, they're used in all sorts of ways, and you know, the health industry couldn't survive without them. But maybe you could focus a bit more, Councillor Moffat. I'm not entirely sure.
I'm specifically talking about grocery store bags. So,
oh, I see. Sorry.
One thing,
Okay, yes.
the politically expedient thing that politicians,
Yes.
that leaders
Yes,
always seem to go
yes,
to
yes.
is let's get rid of single-use plastic grocery bags.
Yes.
Yet almost all the alternatives to grocery store bags are worse for the environment than grocery store bags.
I don't believe that. I think, frankly, you know, a paper bag, a sustainable brown craft paper bag, which has come from a sustainably harvested forest and is using recycled paper is probably better. I'm very, very cautious about the kind of, you know, that kind of issue. I think is something which is pushed by the plastics industry. The facts of the matter is that a number of jurisdictions, Prince Edward Island, have banned the use of plastic grocery sacks, and you know, the world hasn't collapsed. You know, life goes on. People make these adjustments. I have a polyethylene woven grocery bag, which I wash once in a while. I've been using it for my groceries now for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, a very long time. It still holds up. It's perfectly valuable. And I think its environmental impact is way, way less than the continual use of what would effectively be thousands of plastic grocery sacks as an alternative.
Yeah, the Danish Environmental Agency would suggest you need to use that bag 10,000 times for it to have any impact on the climate change. But thanks for the thanks for being here. I think we'll go straight to. I don't think we have any more. Chris, we didn't have any sign-ups, say, for delegations.
Sorry, just trying to find my unmute button. No, there are no other delegations, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Duncan. So I know Councillor Brockington had just a hand up for quite a while. Keith, Councillor Eglai has to go to an OPH thing. Did you want to jump in right now with your questions then, Councillor Eglai?
If Robbie's okay with that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. It's more of a comment than a question. For some of us around the table, we'll remember not that long ago, we were fighting an election around the green bin and getting a lot of negative responses at the door from people that some of us had supported the implementation of the green bin program in the first place. So I see this report as very positive. Yes, we can do more, we can do better, we can increase numbers. But all in all, what I saw in that report was a higher level of acceptance from people, a higher level of understanding from people as to why we went to the green bin program. So I just wanted to take this opportunity, Chair, to thank staff and for the new number one reason being convenience. I'm going to be on the record. I don't understand that. Our environment should not be a matter of convenience. There's a way to deal with it. It's a fairly simple way. Instead of putting in one can, you put it in 2 or 3 cans, depending on whether it's paper or plastic or recyclable. So I'm hoping we can get over that hump, change that number around convenience, because again, this should not be a discussion of convenience or a concern of convenience. This should be about doing the right thing. And yes, sometimes doing the right thing is a little bit inconvenient, but all in all, I think we know that's the way we need to be going forward in the city. And I want to thank staff for the efforts they've made, especially under COVID conditions, to get word out to people and to create more outreach. So I wish you well in your future endeavors when COVID is gone. And thank you again for the report. Very informative.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Eglai. Appreciate that. On to Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you to you and good morning, everyone, and thanks to staff. Very detailed report. Good to see data. Helps us make decisions and know what people are thinking out there. So thank you. I'm wondering if we could, I don't think we need it back on the screen, or maybe it would help some folks. Slide 7 talked about the February stats, and you underscored why February collection stats are important, because there's so little leaf and yard waste being collected, if any, at that point. And that gives us a pretty good idea of what our organic household collection is. But in 2019, the data went down. The total tonnage went down for the year, even though in July 1st, we started permitting bags. So to staff, any idea? This is what is causing me for concern. Yes, I think this report overall is positive. but we know that leaf and yard waste went way up once the pandemic started. People were at home more, they were spending a lot more time in the yard raking. We've previously heard staff say our leaf and yard waste stats were way up. I had hoped that in 2019, this number would have been much higher. In fact, it went down, which I can't understand. So staff, can you comment please on this?
Sure, Councillor. So when looking at this particular, so on slide 7, actually, Chris, do you mind putting that back up? That's solely the February tonnage, so it's not representative of the entire year. So yes, there was a slight decrease. The exact reasoning as to why, we don't have great insight into that, but that's solely just February. So it's not an indicate, that's that point in time before the program changes were put in place.
And we don't have exclusively any data on organics?
That is correct. So the insight the greatest insight that we would have would be from our waste audit. So that's showing almost an even split in terms of organic waste and leaf and yard waste. And so again, we'll be updating that in as early as 2022/2023. So that'll give us some further insight into that.
Okay, but I agree that the metrics in the winter are, I think, are pretty good for us to make some conclusions on. So I appreciate you showing that. The multi-use dwellings, this has been a bone of contention as long as I've been on the Environment Committee. And I think we all agree we need to do significant more. I've got garden homes, condos, like house condos where people don't have garages. And they are asked to use a green bin, store a green bin in their backyard. They don't have the space for it, but they do it. And I don't accept, while I acknowledge that multi-use dwellings were built before these programs started, these buildings aren't going to be torn down to facilitate organic collection. So there's got to be a way for us to expedite their use. Why are we not going to see an action plan for the multi-use dwellings until next year? What's holding us up to get this going even faster than the timelines we're on now?
Absolutely. So, Councillor, in terms of the development of the multi-residential strategy, as I had touched on, so staff have been working hard to undertake research, not only with, it was our multi-residential diversion working group, but we also wanted to glean some of the insight from engagement series 1 as part of the master plan. So that engagement series that took place last spring to give us some greater insight into some of those unique barriers from the resident perspective, but also wanting to ensure that we're wanting to align the strategy with Council's vision on the solid waste master plan, and then aligning engagement on the different policies and programs that we'll be contemplating. So that engagement taking place later this fall. So that's why we're seeing the alignment strategy bringing forward early next year.
Okay, because your own stats indicate residents of multi-use dwellings want to use the organic system. And we look at other businesses, restaurants that have bins outside of the physical building, that there is a way to do this. So if we're really serious about diversion, I'd really like to see this as soon as possible. I think there's a mutual feeling amongst all parties to get this going. Can you talk about some entities you haven't raised? Schools is one of them. Schools do not have a good organic collection. They premise this on litterless lunches, informing parents what their children are not eating, but really this is a way for them not to have to collect it on site, not to have to custodian drag it out to the curb. And yet if half or more than half of households aren't using the green bin, then we can conclude that half of the items coming home through kids' lunches are not going to the landfill, when in fact, if there was a green bin in schools, it could actually be used. What type of outreach are we doing with schools to get them more using green bin?
It's a great question, Councillor. So we do have the Green Bins in Schools program in place. So we have just about 90% of schools across the city participating. Obviously right now, challenging with schools being closed and children working from home, but we do continue our outreach efforts, and we've actually transitioned amidst the COVID pandemic to virtual engagement sessions with schools and with classes as part of that education. I think one of the promising things you see too, just take you a step back in terms of schools are regulated by the province under the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector. So one of the challenges that still exists for the IC&I sector, as well as multi-residential buildings. So remembering too, multi-residential is regulated by the province. They do not have a requirement in place for the IC&I sector, including multi-residential buildings, to have green bin programs in place. The province has indicated that they are transitioning that way, and we're hopeful to understand and learn a little bit more this year. They've indicated. And we have seen with the targets in place at the provincial level, some of the school boards that are interested in upping their game in terms of organics diversion. So we have been having conversations with some of the schools about how to further utilize the city's green bins in program, or green bins in schools program.
I won't dispute that schools have green bins. I'm saying other than paper towels from the washrooms that are going in the green bins, we're not seeing the banana peels and the apple cores and other organics. That is, they're told, put all of your waste and put it in your lunch bag and bring it home. It should be disposed of in school to increase the amount of waste that's being diverted.
Go ahead.
My last question, just to save some time, does the City of Ottawa have the legal authority to make recycling and organic participation mandatory?
So we have the ability as a provision of providing collection services to do that. So you'll see, Councillor, when we bring forward the Solid Waste Master Plan Phase 2, along with a long list of options next month, that mandatory participation in green bin programs in order to receive service from the city is an option on the table.
So I'll park my additional thoughts on that for next month, but we cannot be planning to build another landfill in this city. And so all reasonable options to divert waste that aren't being done now need to be on the table. And I trust that the report that's coming to us will be fulsome in nature, but I'm worried, as I know others are, about the future within the city, that we should not be planning to build another landfill. That really cannot be on our plans to build that. So I appreciate this report, Chair. I do think we are heading in the right direction. It feels slow at times, not a criticism of staff, but let's do what we can to ensure that those diversion rates continue to go up and participation in all programs is as high as it can be. So thank you.
Thanks. Yes, we will be discussing quite a bit at the June Environment Committee meeting on Solid Waste Master Plan Phase 2. I mean, we're going to go out to the public on a lot of options, and there's going to be a lot of options on the table, and it won't all be pretty. And I think, there's nothing that drives negative, positive sentiment more than waste collection and garbage. So when this committee has the list of potential proposals out to the public, expect feedback. Expect feedback, and it won't be. We think we hear a lot from people when we close play structures because of COVID. Just wait when you try to tell them how to manage their waste. It's important. We have to do it. We have to have this conversation, and we need people to understand exactly why we're having this conversation. But it won't be all rainbows and sunshine. All right. Thanks, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Menard, I believe based on my list here, it looks like you might have been up next.
Thanks very much, Chair. And yeah, just to Councillor Brockington's point, the sponsors group that's looking at the Solid Waste Master Plan, there's 4 of us on there. And I can just tell you the options staff are bringing forward, what they're presenting to us as possibilities is comprehensive, very reasonable. They've been working extremely hard on it and doing the background research. So you'll see that come soon. But there's some big potential changes in there. that are very warranted. So just rest assured from what I've seen anyway, this is there's a lot of work that's gone into this, and it's needed to take that time to get this right when we make this choice. But you'll see some options I think you'll want to see in there in terms of the actual potential change in behavior that some of these options will affect. So just to the report, thank you very much to staff. It is helpful to get this data in front of us and to see some of these figures and to see how the program has rolled out, our spending on it, and what has come back. So very useful information, and I appreciate it coming forward. There are a couple pieces that I'm hoping to get more on, just to get a better understanding, either through the survey or the actual numbers we're seeing on the ground. And one of them I asked to the delegation, but did we get any information back from either survey or on the ground about how many residents were previously using the green bin, either just using cereal boxes or newspaper or paper bags, or a variety of other potential methods that have been using it? How many of those folks may have switched their liner to plastic bags as a result of the change?
Sorry, thank you, Councillor. Good question. So in terms of the follow-up market research, you'll notice, I think pages 25 to 27 of the detailed market research did provide some of that insight in terms of existing bag use, and then we're looking at the new bag users as well. So you definitely, there is some insight in terms of some of the shifts that we're seeing, but we really did focus more of the market research on understanding kind of those individuals that are new to the program, what it is that they're using. So that's where you see the, in particular, the individuals who are newer to the program are primarily using plastic bags over the other elements. There's some additional information in terms of the usage. So not all users are using one type of bag. As an example, they're using the multiple types of bags. So for some, I know the market research itself didn't, I don't think it went into that level of detail, but that's something we can take away and see if we can delve into the data further to understand that transition and shift that might have happened between new participants and existing users, because that question primarily focused on it's all users of the program. So it encompassed the new users as well as those who are already participating in the program.
Okay, thank you for that. It would be helpful to get a bit more understanding of how that switch may be happening, that's occurring. Do we know on the ground, our organics processor, how much they've been collecting? I know we know around the we know around our organics and our leaf and yard waste, for example, we're able to extrapolate out the tonnage there. What about on the waste that may be generated that we're extrapolating from the stuff that's going to be decomposing there? You know, plastic bags and other waste products that may find their way in. Do we know about that amount?
So I don't have the exact figure, and that's primarily because the city's contract is to process the organic waste, and then it's Convertus who manages meeting regulatory requirements in terms of the actual end use product that they're creating, but also the residuals that are being managed as part of this program. But with the increase that we're seeing in participation, and then taking a look at the increase in liner use, it's a fair assumption to recognize that there would be more residual waste coming from the additional plastic bags, but the additional compostable bags as well. But I don't have an exact figure.
Okay, thank you for that. It'd be useful, I think, to get that information as well, just like, you know, what we're sending to landfill from the green bin processing site renewing. The City of Ottawa has traditionally invested a lower amount per household in public education promotion compared to some other municipalities. I was really pleased to see that increase recently with this campaign. And I guess the question is, are we going to continue the type of promotion? And I mean, the plastic bags is one tool that has been put out there. There's a whole bunch of value to communicating around the use of your green bin in general and removing organics from your waste stream and recycling and all those things. And so I'm speaking to that more than just saying, like, you know, put plastic bags in your green bin. Are we going to continue that type of outreach and communication in the future? and how much might that have been effective compared to, say, one of the tools that was added? The actual communication itself, how effective was that on its own? I don't know if we can analyze that.
So I'll take a crack at the first part, and then Ghislaine, you can feel free to jump in as well. So, Councillor, we do have an ongoing budget of just around $200,000. So when you take a look at removing out the market research from the cost of what we spent on this particular campaign, it's in and around just under $100,000 more than our annual budget. Our annual budget will continue to focus this year. One of the core priorities is to continue the momentum on green bin education and communications, and especially focusing on the results of the market research and trying to break down some of those additional barriers that have been brought to life. In addition, as part of the Phase 2 Solid Waste Master Plan report that will be brought forward next month, you will see additional options in terms of additional promotion and education, as well as additional outreach. They will be on the table in terms of opportunities moving forward, in recognition of looking at it in the holistic context of understanding all the programs and projects we're going to be recommending together in that broader affordability envelope. And Ghislaine, I'm not sure if you want to add to that.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. My only comment is that I would suggest, in terms of communications, that we stay the course. In terms of, we got some good results in terms of the communications that we've done since the launch of the campaign and the duration of the campaign. There was a lot of good insight that we received from the market research that was able to help us in terms of to learn more about who we're communicating to, what are the barriers, what is the how to reach these people as well. So we had some success with this campaign. I would suggest that we certainly continue this in the future.
Okay, thank you for that. I think the more education on that, the better. And then just my final comment, just around some other municipalities that we've seen that have high rates of organic separation. They may not use the plastic bagging agreement, municipalities like Halifax, for example, but they have very high diversion rates. And so I guess, just to staff, what is the reason for that? I assume it's some of the options we're going to be looking at solid waste master plan, but just get it on the table here. What are the reasons why some municipalities that, again, may not have plastic bags in their green bin, but have great separation and diversion rates, why are they so successful?
Great question, Councillor. And so I think you'll see it through your own independent research. Is every single municipality is different in terms of how they manage their waste management programs. So a lot of cases when we're looking at comparator municipalities, going back to even some of the work done in Phase 1 of the Solid Waste Master Plan, Halifax being one of those comparator municipalities, is they have a combination of different policy options in place. So as you alluded to, some of the options that will be on the table as part of the Solid Waste Master Plan include some of the policy mechanisms, such as pay-as-you-throw, such as clear bag programs, reduced bag and container limits, that are also implemented or in place as a means to encourage additional participation. I think it's important to highlight there's no one silver bullet that's going to address all of our challenges. And it's important to look at things progressively, and just like today, being able to track and bring forward those performance measures, understanding how successful we are with certain policy mechanisms and where we may need to layer on additional policy mechanisms and programs to further promote and encourage program participation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Nicole and staff for this report today. It actually, there's no doubt that a tremendous amount of work went into the report, but also everything leading up to the report. Just a few questions that I had. I just wanted to confirm, when you talk about multi-residential spaces, you're not including townhomes, right? You're talking about apartments, essentially condos.
No, we're including within, when we speak of multi-residential, it's any property that's covered on our multi-residential contract. So it includes high-rise, it includes mid-rise, it includes some of those townhouse home complexes, and some of those units that tend to be, they're 6 or more units.
Okay, so if a townhome neighborhood uses a pad service, you are including them as multi-residential.
It depends. So if they have the containerized collection, they're considered multi-residential.
Gotcha.
Versus if it's the common pad where they're placing out their own bags, that would be considered curbside. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. I just
No
was
problem.
never clear on that. And the I just want to, I mean, I'm not going to revisit the plastics in green bins. I did not agree with it, initially, but I just want to, and I look forward very much to next month and having that discussion. And there's no doubt the chair is correct that easy discussion, easy decisions, but we have to do something to drive up diversion. It's, going from 50 to 58% in green bin use is something, but we also spent almost $500,000 getting there, right? Like $448,000 in communications and outreach, and the majority of that, was comms and outreach. It wasn't market research. So, but I have do I have my numbers right? Like, so we went up 8%. We spent an awful lot of money on outreach and communications. And we are now providing 41% of units in multi-residential buildings with green bins. So, it's hard to attribute that 8% increase to simply allowing plastic bags or allowing dog waste. And I guess there's no way of having pulled that apart except to say that the yuck factor is no longer the top reason why people don't use a green bin, although it's still one of the reasons. But we also still have 18% of people who hate using green bins, and that essentially didn't change. So I'm guessing that 18% also, a significant amount of those also don't use them because of what they feel is a yuck factor. Did we get that out of the research that we did as well?
Great question, Councillor. So the intent of this market research was to take a look at the broad-based behavior shifts. So what we didn't do was replicate the market segmentation that was done as part of the original market research. That gave us really good insight in terms of the motivators that we were able to use to target our communications. But we do recommend in future market research, as in future years, once the pandemic is over in particular as well, that we do revisit that so we can see that shift in behaviors and participation specific to those market segments. But as that original market research uncovered, we have that disconnected population, which is about 24% of residents who have those deep-seated attitudes that they just do not believe in the environmental benefit of participating in diversion programs. But then there's also a large proportion of that population that are simply not educated on the programs itself. So this particular communication campaign really focused our efforts on those two in between market segments, so the aspirational and the inconsistent, because we knew they had strong opportunity to be able to swing their behaviors and reducing the yuck factor, encouraging them to participate. But there's definitely still more work to be done outside of this particular campaign to look and target the disconnected group. And of course, that's going to take a lot of time to be able to shift those attitudes and those behaviors, especially in individuals who have those deep ingrained social or beliefs that, diversion does nothing to impact to positively impact the environment.
No, absolutely. And I think that is key. And I think that most taxpayers will agree if they're doing their part. They don't want their taxes going to building a new landfill for people who don't want to do their part. So at some point, those who don't want to do their part have to pay for it. It should not be spread amongst everyone else. So I think that's the conversation that we have to have in terms of what is the fair consequence of just throwing out everything that you use and not caring about the environment, but also passing along those costs to the rest of us. So I look forward to it. Thank you. Thank you for this report. It's got some good information in it.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, just an example of just what Councillor McKinney was saying at the end about, targeting. Targeting is probably the wrong word, but touching in on those individuals who just don't follow or just don't use all the options, right? Councillor Gower and I had a resident reach out to us last week after seeing a story about, I think I was quoted as talking about punitive measures. It was an elderly gentleman that uses green bin, uses recycling, puts out a small garbage bag a week or every 2 weeks, and was worried that we were going to target him. I said, "You're not the problem. That's not, I drive by a house that puts out 20 garbage bags every 2 weeks. No recycling to be found, no green bin to be found. It's that situation, right? It's not someone who puts out, 2 green bins, 3 blue boxes, and maybe 3 or 4 garbage bags. That's not the target. That's not the folks that we're trying to say that it's the absence of all the recycling options that exist at the end of your laneway, that some residents are doing absolutely nothing. We have multi-res buildings in the downtown core where it's just piles and piles of garbage bags outside. There's a lot to do, but the overwhelming majority of residents in this city are doing everything they're supposed to be doing. So I don't want, it's going to be them that actually reach out to us and are upset with some of the decisions we make, but we're not trying to unfairly impact residents. We're trying to find ways to increase these numbers, and that's where this conversation goes. But it's, like I said earlier, it's going to be challenging, but we need to make sure that we're focused on the right outcomes. There's no question, if anyone is going to have a landfill end up in their community, you're looking at them. I host the one that's there now. We have other landfills coming online. It's also $300 million of capital money that has to go into it. $300 million would also go toward an incinerator. If you wanted a Covanta incinerator in your community, I think the one down in Durham is located near no residential communities whatsoever, which means those also exist in the rural area and also come with a price tag of $300 million, along with a significant increase in tipping fees, which would increase the garbage collection rate for residents. Those are the 2 options that are the very last options on the list. So the conversation we have today about organics and increasing that all lead to not having those 2 options. That's where we go. They're always going to be options. They have to be, but they're at the very, very bottom of the list. Everything else comes above them. And that's the conversation for next month. So thanks again. Councillor King, I see you there.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nicole, for the very in-depth report. A lot of good information there, especially around increases in tonnage, and especially with everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody, because we do have a large number of people who are essential workers who are doing a lot of good work on behalf of all of us every day. But of course, we have had an increase in people working from home, and we've seen this as a result increase in organics tonnage. The question I have is more exploratory, I suppose, looking to the future. How do we retain these high rates as we head towards the light at the end of the tunnel? I think we're trying to be optimistic. Hopefully in the near future, life will start to resume as normal. And if it does, there will be people heading back to the workplace. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the future thinking, whether that's marketing or other strategies that are going to be employed by staff, how are we going to maintain or attempt to maintain this trend?
Great question. Thank you, Councillor. so in terms of, first and foremost, continued education and outreach efforts, and that's going to continue throughout this year and into the future, and building on that momentum and trying to further break down or providing information to break down some of those additional barriers that we're now seeing kind of creep up as these barriers have evolved. So that's the first piece. The second piece being, we anticipate, so those individuals who are participating now, despite the fact of the COVID-19 pandemic, if they've, going back to that market research where you had 6% of individuals who said, I'm at home now, I'm cooking, I'm eating more at home, and it's encouraged me to participate in the Green Bin program. So you have those individuals plus the additional individuals who are now participating, and mainly so, or they've indicated because of the program changes. We're anticipating that now that they've made that behavior shift and that habit shift, that is something we can anticipate continuing into the future. And as Councillor Moffat had touched on, next month, as we bring forward the solid waste master plan in the phase 2, we are going to be looking at different policy options to help continue build on the success we're seeing to date and to help continue that momentum moving forward.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. I think that needs to be a central focus. So, people are starting to build better habits around green bins and organics, and we have to figure out ways to really sustain that. So I really thank you for those efforts. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you, Councillor King. I don't see any more questions from members of committee on this item. Therefore, it's just receiving the report for information. And again, it's an important conversation to have because it's going to feed into exactly what we discuss in much more detail next month. And then there's going to be a public consultation period as well following that. I think into the summer and I think into the fall, if I'm not mistaken. So on that report, can we receive that report for information?
It can, Chair, it has to be carried. It's also going to council for its information. So received and carried.
Okay.
Received
Okay.
and carried.
Fair enough.
Received and carried.
Received and carried.
Carried and received.
Yeah. It's funny because it's not what the agenda says. It just says received. We should catch that earlier. Make sure that I'm not sounding like an absolute procedural fool in these situations. All right. Moving on to item 3. Service Line Warranties of Canada program. Long history on this one. It's like the line from Cool Hand Luke with less violence, but what we've got here is a failure to communicate. Essentially just a matter of this is a program that council, I would say, I don't think tentatively is the right word, but we did approve this program back in 2016. It took some time before things were finalized and approved, and we received an update on that right before Christmas through a memo to members of council, which set out the program launch. The program launch was in February, and we all heard a little bit about that program from constituents. We also know that many people actually signed up for the program, though. So what we have here in front of us today is not necessarily a discussion about the merits of the program, but mainly on that sort of launch and what happened there. And there was some concerns and misleading information to residents. So I know Councillor Menard has brought this forward, and I mean, you've all seen the response to Councillor King's inquiry as well, back from the March Environment Committee meeting, and staff have been kind of working with Councillor Menard on this and are fully prepared to accept any direction that we provide today with regard to what we see here in the motion. So I'll turn it over to Councillor Menard because it is your item. So I'll allow you to speak to that and introduce it. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks so much, Chair. And I don't have to say much about it in terms of the intro to it, just that I appreciate staff coming back and working together on this. We had a lot of residents obviously email all of us and email staff and concerned about receiving these pieces and confusion around the item with the logo use and a number of other issues that came to the fore. A lot of people receiving them that just didn't have the ability to actually apply for it in the first place. So I know we received concern from rural areas, urban and suburban areas, so right across the city. Chair, if you'd like, the motion has changed. There is one slight change there, so I probably, from what I had tabled previously, I give a notice of. Did you want me to read out whereas and the direction, or what would you like? I can do either. I'm in your hands.
I think we can save this. I mean, the whereas is just the storytelling, right? So I think if you just go straight to the direction as to what exactly what committee's asking for here today, I think that'll suffice.
Okay, I'll do that. Save us some time as well. Chris, are you able to put that up on the screen and just the requests within their motion recommendations? I've got it here on mine, but I think it's helpful if everyone can see it on the screen too.
We're working to make that happen.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it'd be helpful for people to see it, so I'll wait for oh, there we go. Fantastic. Okay, so it's that the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management recommend that City Council, 1, direct staff to prepare a communication that can be shared by councillors. Example, website newsletter mail out with residents, which clearly outlines the SLWC program, highlights the various options residents may have available with respect to protection for private water and sewer services, and clarifies the parameters and implications of the city's arrangements with SLWC. 2, direct staff to provide members of council with a review and comment period of no less than 10 business days for any future program communication from SLWC related to the service warranty program. And 3, direct staff to undertake a review of the Service Line Warranties of Canada program launch and report back to council on their findings and suggestions, which would include lessons learned related to A, City of Ottawa logo use, B, clarification on mail sent to addresses where the warranty program is not an option, i.e. multi-property, C, confusion regarding messaging in the letter where residents may perceive undue obligation, D, an overview of options available, and this is the new part, an overview of options available to residents should council not wish to partner with a private service warranty company to mitigate the risk of private water sewer service failures, and E, evaluating strategies for briefing and engaging members of council in advance. Like I said, I want to thank staff for working collaboratively on this. We've gone back and forth on it, and I think we're at a good place now that'll hopefully meet the needs of members of this committee and council. Back to you, Chair.
Thanks. Yeah, I think in hindsight it would have been, I think if we had held a technical briefing for members of council, often you try to predict, where you need to have a technical briefing on what issue. This one didn't jump off the page until we sent the stuff out, and I think probably if you think back and in the age of water heater scams, I think that's really what clouds this one, right? We know that exists. We know that concerns out there. We communicate that out to residents constantly, and then they see this sort of multi-font fold-out page with our logo sort of last minute affixed to the top corner, and it's not necessarily the quality. Sean's trying to show us, but it's really just disappearing into his fake background kitchen. So we've all seen it, Sean. It's okay. You don't have to add the visual insult to the injury already. But yeah, it's just one of those things where we look at it now and say, well, if we had done it this way, it probably would have gone a lot better. So that's what this is about here. And we'll just offer members of committee a chance to ask questions on this or to comment. So first up is Councillor Dudas.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm absolutely not here to debate the merits or the need for this type of program. It's a good program, and I'm glad it's being offered to our residents. But there's absolutely no question that the communications rollout was beyond acceptable. The lines were blurred between a private entity and the City of Ottawa, and it confused our residents and it put into question their trust in our use of our logo. And it boils down to a communications error. And I want to thank Councillor Menard for bringing forward his motion. I fully support it. And if he hadn't have done it, I would have done the same thing. And I know that there's a number of councillors who felt the same way. The question I have is that the motion itself speaks directly to this one incident and this one communications and SLWC. But I do not want to see this happen again. I don't want our residents put into another circumstance where they get whatever program it is, no matter how valuable it is for them or for the city. I don't want them to get another mail out, email, phone call that has our name on it, our brand on it, and for them to be confused and think that this is a scam. So my question is that, I fully support this motion. I think it's wonderful, and I'll be supporting it when it comes to City Council. But, my question to staff is, how are you going to make sure that this doesn't happen again? How are you going to make sure that there's a second sober thought given to whatever goes out to our residents to make sure that any red flags are addressed before it is sent out, without relying on us as politicians to triple check and edit those documents?
Chair, perhaps I'll take that question. And I agree with everything that's said. Looking in hindsight, this was a failure of communication, and I'll take full responsibility for that as the head of the department. And further to taking responsibility, I think also working with our colleagues in PIMR to make sure that these things are caught. And I think it's a lesson to us all. I can't see any program going forward without us having a good, solid review and consultation on it, if that's of any help at all.
It is, because I think, it's, we can err in judgment. No, none of us are infallible, but to take that as a lesson learned. And I'm happy to hear that, working closely with PIMR, that you'll be able to address this going forward. Once again, I'm going to emphasize, I don't ever want to see this happen again. I don't want any of my residents or any of the city's residents to have to be confused about our brand on anything particular. They could disagree with it, but for them to think it's a scam is completely inappropriate. So thank you for that, Kevin. I appreciate you taking that under your responsibility, and we'll take our lessons learned from it. And I think this motion is wonderful. So thank you.
Thanks for the tens of people listening at home. PIMR stands for Public Information and Media Relations. I'm not sure how embedded the PIMR acronym is into the knowledge base of Ottawans. I will say, just in the motion, it is somewhat generic that it would speak to inform future decisions on City of Ottawa logo use. That third point is, while it says direct staff to undertake a review of the SLWC launch, the report back to council on the finding suggestions would include lessons learned related to the City of Ottawa local use, and that would be for the purposes of future potential use. Again, the issue was we approved the use of the logo back in 2016, but then never had that. I guess the follow-up was so far past when we approved the use of the logo that we kind of forgot that we approved it. And 7 councillors weren't actually here in 2016 that were here, that are here now. And I'm looking at 3 of them right now. So thank you, Councillor Jess. Thank you, Kevin. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd really like to thank Councillor Menard for moving this motion. I know that we had some discussions along with Councillor McKinney on some of the content around this motion. I'd also like to closely associate myself with the comments that were made by Councillor Dudas. I do agree that there has been some confusion around this, and we want to ensure that communication is very clear. So that's one of the reasons why I was actually heartened by what you were saying, Scott, around the idea of a technical briefing. And that's one of the elements of the direction that I wanted to bring forward around the inquiry that I had really submitted. So I did submit the text of that direction to Chris. And it ultimately reads, in response to my inquiry, the City of Ottawa's corporate technical briefing guidelines suggests that technical briefings should be offered to update council about major legislative initiatives, projects, and significant newsworthy developments. At the time of the program launch, staff were not of the opinion that the partnership program with SLWC satisfied any of the reference criteria. My direction asks, would staff take direction to have an addendum to those guideline criteria that would ensure compulsory technical briefings are held concerning the rollout of citywide programs that are targeted to residents provided by third parties. I think especially around the timeline of this rollout, just before Christmas, memos to councillors' mailboxes, obviously, depending upon the councillor's offices to really talk about the depth and the breadth of this program, I don't think is sufficient based on its wider impact. I think that this type of program definitely does require a technical briefing. And as a result, that's the direction that I want to complement with this motion here at the committee today. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, and I appreciate you making that super specific so that we don't end up with a technical briefing every second day. But you're right. I mean, we don't do a lot of these partnership type situations that would involve any group communicating to residents really on our behalf almost. So no, I think that's fair. So we have that. Do you have that? If Chris has that, if you could just circulate that to members of committee, if he hasn't already. I'm not looking at my.
I do, Chair, and I will.
Thank you so much. You're the best. All right, thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. This is an issue that just won't go away. Here it comes back just when I thought the emails from my constituents on this matter died off. Definitely raised concern in my community. People thought they were being misled. Not only was the communication confusing, they thought it was deliberately misleading from the company, using City of Ottawa logo, thinking they could pull a fast one. The intent may have been positive or may have been in good faith, but people were quite upset that, one, the city would partner with a private organization, and two, allow our name and logo to be used for this purpose. And so it was not clear, and definitely believe going forward needs to be more clear. So as I think Catherine McKenney said, I'm not here to debate whether or not the service this company's offering is good or not. It's because people weren't arguing. Some people have actually subscribed to this service. They did their homework. They felt that this was insurance that they needed, and they went ahead. Fine. I was never debated that. It was how they were approached and the feeling of this doesn't sit right with me. And so clarity going forward is a must. My question about part one of the motion, I mean, staff issued, I believe, 2 pretty thorough memos after this was mailed, because there were 2 mailings. Is there anything being asked for in part one of this motion that staff have not already provided us? I have summarized those memos. I've put it in my monthly newsletters. I've tweeted it out. We've provided thorough replies to everyone that's emailed me in months past. And I know, Councillor Menard, you gave notice quite a while ago, so maybe this was more in tune or in line with what was needed when it was first put forward. But is there anything new being asked for?
We did respond, Chair? Or?
Yeah, so I see we have Megan Wheeler-Cuddy here, who just came on camera, and she's the program manager for this partnership. So I'll allow Megan to respond.
So, Chair, thank you for the question. We have prepared and updated the frequently asked questions based on the inquiries we've received from both councillors' offices and from residents, as well as providing information through the city website. We don't currently have any additional mailouts planned to residents. However, we would be willing to look at that as part of our review of the program to clarify things.
Okay. I guess in short, I'll just say what I would like to have more information on is how the city makes decisions on whether or not they're going to entertain into a partnership with a private entity. We heard this is rare. I'd like to have a better understanding how that is done. And then if in the future we go forward, how the city's name and or logo is used in those communications, I think is very important. I think it needs to be much more clear in any mailings. But I mean, I support Councillor Menard's motion. There's a lot of good companies I think the city of Ottawa could partner with, but I don't think we want to go down that road. I don't think that's the role for us. And that's the main issue that I've certainly heard from my residents that I think we need to address and put to bed once and for all. So thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Yeah, and this one, I mean, this one's pretty unique because it was specific to the residential protective plumbing program that was approved by council, and this was just a feature of it. And looking at what other municipalities do, looking at what was endorsed by Association of Municipalities of Ontario with SLWC, the fact that they're the only provider of its kind in Ontario too, led to a lot of those things. So again, it's a lot of unique aspects of it that kind of is a perfect storm into what created this situation, and really just the communication piece that could be improved upon. I also do expect there will likely be future mailouts because this is a partnership that will be ongoing, and I imagine there will be an opportunity in the future where they would come out and want to, you know, refresh people's memory with this. So that's something that we'll have to, you know, be prepared for and make sure that we're on top of it so this doesn't happen again with this specific provider. All right, thank you, Councillor Bockington, and I see Councillor Cloutier is.
Thank you very much, Chair, and certainly agree with the comments by my colleagues, and I appreciate Councillor Menard wanting to bring clarity to this issue. And like Kevin said, you know, a bit of a failure to communicate effectively. And Megan, appreciate seeing you here. Thank you very much. And I just want to highlight, I don't know if you can give me an answer now, but just want to highlight how confusing it can be for residents who are looking at information on the City of Ottawa page with respect to the FAQs. And I appreciate that I've just tuned in and just looked at that page and saw some updated questions versus some information that they're getting from service line warranties. And an example is, and I got this from a resident who attempted to, did their due diligence, attempted to sign up, and was advised that there is a 30-day wait period followed by 11 months of coverage. And the resident was asking me about how that reconciles with the FAQ that says, are there any wait periods for submitting a claim when opting into a plan? And the answer is no. Homeowners can submit a claim as soon as their plan is active. Reading it and looking at it, I can see as soon as their plan is active can mean after the 30-day wait period. I presume that's what it means. But I just want to highlight for residents how confusing that can be. So Megan, can you comment on that, or can...
Thank you for the question. Chair, it's my understanding that Service Line Warranty has waived the 30-day period, and we've actually had residents that have had successfully submitted claims through the program. However, I will be following up with the company, and where we've received information through councillors' offices or through residents of inconsistencies, city staff are following up with Service Line Warranty to understand and clarify those inconsistencies to ensure that residents are receiving the service that they understood they were getting through this program.
Okay. Thank you very much. Perhaps I could communicate with you offline and we can assist the resident in getting the information that he needs to make the choices that are appropriate for their family. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions. I will just say, just to add some of the comments on the, oh, you have the technical, no, that's somebody, yeah, you have the direction to staff in your inbox. So members of the committee, the direction from Councillor King is in your inbox, and I'll ask him to read that just in a couple seconds just so we can put it back out there and then accept that direction or have that direction go directly to staff. I just wanted to, the rural component was interesting, right? Because it was slightly confusing in the way that SLWC offering a program for rural residents was legitimate because they offer a protection program that is for private services as well as those who are on municipal services. But the challenge was what we approved at committee, and the reason why we entered into the partnership was because of the municipal connections. It was just there's confusion around multiple things, and that was one of the things I had to provide clarity on for some of my constituents, was that, why are we being asked, why are we being provided this information? Because I'm not connected to water and sewer, I'm on well and septic. But the reality is SLWC used the opportunity to also advertise the fact that they provide something on private services, but it just wasn't necessarily the intent of council to enter into a program for that purpose. So it was just a bit of an odd little conundrum between the reality of the program and what they offer. So maybe it's not necessary. I mean, Councillor King already read it out loud. I mean, we all heard what it was. Again, you have it in your inbox. So just on that direction from Councillor King, are we good with that? Yeah. All right. So directed. And then on the motion, the report in front of us, but you heard the slight change in the text of the motion from Councillor Menard. So on that, is that approved by committee as amended?
Carried. Thanks.
Carried.
Carried.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's go back to our lovely agenda. We don't have any in-camera items. Information previously distributed. You all would have received at the end of March the Municipal Drinking Water Systems 2020 summary reports, where we once again kick ass like we always do. And so that is something that you all have. Notices of motion. Any notices of motion? I don't have any. See none. Inquiries.
I have a quick inquiry, Chair.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Let's pull it up here. Okay. This inquiry, it's related to a lot of emails we've been receiving lately on idling as the summer period comes up again. Really difficult to enforce this one and has a lot of exceptions. And so it's a very real air pollution impact, and something we wanted to bring forward to get some more answers on. In light of so here's the inquiry. In light of the climate emergency that Ottawa recently declared and the public health impacts of air pollution, this inquiry concerns the effectiveness and enforceability of Ottawa's anti-idling bylaw and seeks options that may improve outcomes. It is also recognized that it is an extremely challenging time for city staff and councillors' offices, and that answers to the following questions may require longer than usual response times. The first is around how many idling complaints have been received each year since 2019, and how many have resulted in fines or other actions. 2, what education campaigns has the city undertaken or supported in regard to idling? 3, is there any existing anti-idling signage, and would the city support this approach at targeted hotspots? 4, what vehicles are exempt from the idling bylaw? Are these blanket exemptions or situational? And 5, given that the bylaw was enacted in 2007, would staff support a refresh of the bylaw that considered the following? And this would include a review of effective strategies in other municipalities. A, reducing exceptions. B, reducing allowable idling time from 3 minutes to 1 minute. And C, eliminating or reducing the temperature range in which vehicles are allowed to idle increasing fines, and taking a proactive approach to education and enforcement. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. So I realize it's an inquiry that'll come back to this committee, but the actual bylaw itself, if I'm not mistaken, would fall under Community Protective Services Committee. Am I wrong on that?
The bylaw piece would be, yeah, there's some overlap here for sure.
Right. So okay. So just because if there's any, if there was any desire to change some of the parameters of the bylaw, we wouldn't have authority over that. That's all. Okay. Thank you. Any other inquiries? I see none. Other business. I will just say, I just wanted to thank staff, Andrea Flowers, Stephen Willis, who are part of the Ottawa Climate Action Fund Advisory Board. I was invited to sit on that just in my role as chair of this committee, but they are staff sort of advisory, have a staff advisory element on that new advisory board, which has, I believe they have about $22 million to invest in programming and partnerships to help fight climate change in the city. And they work off a lot of what we've already approved through our climate change master plan and our energy evolution program. So they're doing some great work. They had a big launch last week. And so just wanted to thank Andrea Flowers and Stephen Willis. I know they're a big part of that, especially Andrea, and everything that she does in her role with our climate change and resiliency group. So thank you for that. And on adjournment. Adjourned.
Adjourned. Bye.
Catherine's so quick to adjourn. She's like, get me out of here.
I'm out of here.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you. Our next meeting is, our next meeting is scheduled for June 15th, but it's actually going to be moved. We're likely going to move that to the end of June. I think we're looking right now at June 29th. So you'll get more on that. But right now it's in all likelihood, it's going to be Tuesday, June 29th. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your day.